Welcome to Mormon Book Reviews, where an evangelical encounters the restoration. But this is actually a very special, and I'm your host, Stephen Pinecker. This is a very special episode of Mormon Media Reviews. And my frequent co-host, Briell Decker, is in the house. How you doing today?
I am well, really excited about this interview and discussion today, Steve.
As am I. So just within the last 48 hours, a new series on Discovery Plus was released called Prisoner of the Prophet. And it is dealing with Warren Jeffs. And we have a very special guest on, Briell Decker, who was the 65th wife of Warren Jeffs. Welcome to the program today.
Thank you.
So Rebecca, I'd asked you to ask the first question on this episode because you actually consumed the episode last night. You're up till like 3 o'clock in the morning. You were drinking a Diet Coke to stay awake so you could watch the thing. It really captured you. And I've been hearing this from other people. There's a viewer who posted on our interview yesterday on YouTube. As soon as I watched the interview, I went and watched it, and I was up well after midnight watching it. So people are watching this because they're just finding it now. So just talk a little bit about how exciting this is to actually have Briell on, and also the most important thing is how we're able to get her story out. And maybe you could talk about that.
Yeah, this has just been an incredible last couple days. So we knew this was coming out. I had been posting about it on my Facebook, the Good Media Club channel, just kind of letting people know that it was coming out. And Allison Biggers, of course, a very good friend of Brielle's, we connected with her, and yesterday posted an episode where she talked about this documentary and her own experiences visiting one of the locations mentioned in the documentary, which is a compound in South Dakota. So we had a very interesting discussion with her, which even further piqued our interest about this documentary. And then corresponding with Allison, it just kind of became apparent that it was possible that we could communicate with Briell herself and maybe be able to talk. And so we reached out, and she was so wonderful and gracious and said, yes, I will talk to you guys tomorrow morning. And I thought, well, that's it. It's 11 o'clock at night, but I'm going to watch this dang documentary. So I sat down, and I don't even know if I can explain or express what it is. I will just say to everybody, please watch it. I mean, I'd watched many documentaries on polygamy before on the different groups. I thought I had an understanding. I grew up mainstream LDS. I definitely had an understanding there. This documentary is like nothing I've ever seen before, as far as being able to understand what is really happening, and just Briell herself and her incredible spirit and determination. I've really seen nothing like it. So it's on Discovery Plus. Please, everybody, get a free subscription and please watch it. So anyway, enough about me and my reaction. We're just so happy to have Briell here with us today. We are absolutely thrilled. And I think my first question would be, as I was watching, I thought, how did this project even happen? How did this get started? Who contacted you? Did you contact them? Did they contact you? Tell us a little bit about the origins of this wonderful and amazing documentary.
Okay, so in the year of 2020, everybody was home. So I had a producer reach out to me, and she wasn't like real famous at the time. She had talked to Brian Steele, who is he's like a he's really he runs the Phoenix Dream Center, and he knows me pretty well because of the Short Creek Dream Center. He's the one that kind of has a lot of say until like dream centers are off the ground, and then he passes it on to somebody else. And he kind of has still saying it, but it's not like his thing as once it's the startup as part is over. He mentioned in a conversation with her about like my story, how the Short Creek Dream Center got started. And it piqued her interest, so she reached out to me. And we ended up becoming pretty close friends pretty fast. And she told me it probably wouldn't go very big and that she just would do her best. And so I ended up signing with her like a temporary, small contract. And after I signed that, I had like 7 people reach out, producers, and I didn't know very much about that, but I couldn't sign with anybody else because I already signed with her. She submitted my story into another producer company that was a lot bigger in Every Woman's Studio, and that is quite far east. And they selected my story out of a bunch of stories and paid like $20,000 to hire a director to pitch it to Discovery Plus. And they picked it up. So they pitched it to a bunch of people, and Discovery Plus is the one that had the interest and paid for it to be made. So it was it was a long process. One of the biggest catches was when after they pitched it, they had me in contract, but they didn't have the Dream Center and they didn't have the South Dakota and Colorado properties in contract at the time. So they were like, we have to get those in contract or we have to repitch, and they would have the chance to say no after that. So we just talked to him. I was friends with Seth in the documentary. He's one of the three guys that owns the land over there now in South Dakota and Colorado, and he's been a really close friend of mine for years. And when I became friends with him, he's ex FLDS, but I didn't know him because I was younger. When I was in the FLDS, we met after we both left, and I stayed at his house in Salt Lake. He has several locations, but anyway, I didn't know he was going to go get the South Dakota and Colorado compound when I became friends with him. So we just worked that out. It took a lot because they didn't understand media a whole lot themselves. But they ended up signing, and the Dream Center signed also. They kind of agreed prior, and it did make it so it did all. So we got all the pieces, and then we were able to proceed. So there was catches in there. They say that sometimes documentaries fall flat, and there are reasons why. And then yeah, there was a lot of things, but I'm just really happy with how they got it done and how they took the time to do it. There was some really scary points in there, but like I just mentioned, one of them. So anyway, it happened, and that was the amazing thing. So yeah.
No, I wanted to talk about the Dream Center because that's kind of a tie-in with our worlds. But before we do that, I thought since this has been basically 48 hours since these episodes have dropped, what has been the response been like? What's it been the kind of feedback you've been getting? And how are you handling it all?
Okay, so I get a lot of feedback, mostly good. I haven't had any bad yet. I don't think. Everybody's just blown away by it so far. And all the comments I get, like, I'm just floored with your story. And just, like really, one person said something really encouraging about like, I met you back in the day and I heard about the house. You hadn't found the Dream Center yet. And how, something about like how, it's something that's been needed for generations. I felt that you were going to pull it off, and now it's one of the most amazing things that I've witnessed. Stuff like that. Yeah,
Wow.
There's really good feedback so far. I spend a lot of time on the phone because I really want people to know that I care, and it's a big deal to me to at least have something. Sometimes I just say thank you, but like I really want to talk more. I work 40 hours a week and stuff, so there's not always time for that, but I do try to at least say something.
So I guess here's your chance to say something to all the
Yeah.
people saying encouraging words. What do you have to say to them?
I would like to say I am really grateful for everybody that gives feedback, even if it's negative. Like I feel like it's good to hear because like there's always more sides, more perspectives. Um, I don't want people to feel limited in telling what they feel. So I know I was taught to keep sweet no matter what, but that's not what I require. So and I don't do that anymore. But so anyway.
Wow.
Does your family that is still that you have very limited contact, as I understood from the documentary, if any, are they aware of anything like this that you've done
Yes.
this? Is that maybe the negative? Talk a little bit about that. That was some of the most poignant moments in this, Steve, is just knowing that, when you walked the perimeter of the fence and you said, they're in there, my family, my friends, they're in this, physically they're there, and also psychologically they're in. So I would love to hear more about just your family and their reaction and that.
So I don't hear a lot, but I do know they hear about it. They're affected by it.
Right.
I do hear mostly things from people they work for and stuff like that. They don't always get like all the information, obviously, but what they do know, they all over the world, they can't really hide because and people reach out to me and secretly talk to me. So like, yeah, they've learned to just deal with it, but they don't really. I know they do keep track of me, but they don't. Like I don't always hear their reactions, especially immediately. Sometimes I'll hear them like way later. So like they tell me things like now about the day that I escaped. They said they had told me to lay down and read, so they thought that I laid down and read when I actually climbed out the window, and they didn't notice for 2 hours that I had actually left.
That's a riveting scene, Steve. When you get to that, that is just, I mean, and it's funny because our interview with that we did with Allison Biggers talking about the documentary, I asked her the question, what is a takeaway that you'd like viewers to take away, not having seen it yet? She goes, I want people to understand Brielle's spirit and her I mean, I get emotional talking about it, determination in those circumstances, and so I watched it and I'm like, that is what comes through. This documentary transcends even the situation. Anyone can find inspiration in a situation that they're in, to just a lifetime of fighting is what you did. It was just, Steve, you'll just be overwhelmed to see it. So how do you, I mean, that spirit was there having been born in it, and yet you saw it, you knew that it wasn't right, and you had to get out. I mean, what do you attribute that to? It was incredible.
I think it was my father. My grandparents on my father's side were kicked out of the church when I was 13 years old. So that's why I say the generations were not like consistent. Because on my father's side, then they were kicked out when I was young. So there's a broken chain. On my mother's side, they were converts when she was 4 years old. So I don't have the 7 generations that would require you to be a favorite wife in one just family. They're more brainwashed, obviously, if you have 7 generations of consistency. Where my father had more critical thinking. He didn't ever express it because he couldn't really, under the circumstances of maybe being possibly lose his family and stuff, but you could see it in his actions. He did what he did for his family, to keep his family together the longest that he possibly could. He actually got kicked out. They didn't say that in the documentary, but he got kicked out and lost his family a week after I escaped.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
How's your father doing?
He's good friends with me. He's never held it against me. I visit him like every week, try to go and see him for a short time, or he's doing pretty good, but he is lonely. My mother's still in there, obviously, and yeah.
There's a scene. Sorry, I was going to say there's a scene, Steve, where your father comes in when he's going to take you to basically your marriage, or to meet Warren, and maybe just talk about that for a second, because that was very emotional, I thought, for me, where your dad had no choice, and he seemed like he was devastated to have to take you there. And that's just an example of families. You override any natural instinct that you have as a parent to protect. It's just gone. That, maybe talk very briefly about that scene. It was just incredible.
So it kind of didn't talk about the whole picture, and they just they just really got to the point about like we were trapped, we were psychologically trapped, mentally trapped. So like my father, it does explain a little bit about how the fathers had a choice to either give up one daughter, and I was 18, like imagine if I was younger, or else lose all their daughters, so Warren would take away the family if they didn't do what he said. So they had a really tight cornered position. In my case, I was older, so it wasn't as big of a catch-22 for him. He was crying though. I don't believe he wanted to do it. And he actually told me, I did not want you to marry Warren Jess after like all of it. After we both get out, he's like, I never wanted you to do that. In that scene, I was making dinner. It talks about that. I was making dinner. My mother was actually behind me, and she actually screamed no, because she saw father before me. My back was to the doorway, and she screamed no, because she had seen his face and his flushed face, and she had 14 children. I was number 11. She had seen this before. She recognized that it was the wedding night. And she screamed no. I turned around to see father's face, and that's what it kind of explains. My father's face was flushed. He said, it's Kona Drive. Yeah. So it was actually more horrific than what they said. But that's really common in my story. They kind of went like a basic line that's dark enough. We don't need
Mm.
like, yeah, every detail. And those are kind of tangents anyway. But yeah, so my mother didn't get invited. She didn't get to go on the drive with us. She just stayed behind like a submissive mother would do. And my father, when I got in the car, he was crying, and yeah, it was very traumatic. I think because my sister had already gone into Warren Jeff's family. So she went into Rulin's family first and then married Warren before me. So I think they had pretty good idea, but we didn't know for sure until it was confirmed.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah.
I I can't. Rebecca kind of gave me a debriefing of this thing, and it was intense hearing the summation from her. But then to think that they really only were just touching on these stories,
Yeah.
much more to it than even what they wanted to. It was almost too dark for them. Man, I'll tell you, that's just astonishing. Your tale of survival to be able to get through this, and really, that's really what we want to take out of this too, is just the positivity of being able to go through a hellish existence, being in a cult, living in a world completely foreign to ours. And somehow, some way, you got through it. And I think your story can also be a universal one for many
Yeah.
people who are in very bad places, whether they created their own hell or they were born in their own hell, that you were able to get out of it and survive it, and in many ways reclaim your life.
Yeah, that's why I tell my story. Literally. I want to empower people. I want them to come forward. And it does say that in like words. Come forward if you're being abused, let's talk, It's a big deal to me. Like it really is. And it also goes into like how so much trauma like stacked on top of each other, and how the cult should be responsible for that to some degree, because there's so many suicides, and it's basically like murder, and the occult experts like explain that in it. Like it's basically like murder to just put somebody through an endless trauma.
Mm. One of the things I wanted to talk about too is one of the co-stars, if you will, of the series, from my understanding, as described to me, is the compound in South Dakota. And you were able to go back there to film. I want to know, what was it like for you to go back there?
Oh, well, I do talk about that too in there, about like how, and they did put it in about like, I do have to have a support system around me. I do have to trust the people that are with me because I have triggers. I was expecting that. I I just have to watch. I have coping strategies now. I've been through therapy for like 10 years. I've been out almost 11 years. On May 23rd will be 11 years. So I just have to really take care of myself and be conscious of my mood and all of that. It actually I've done things like that before that. So even like being awarded Warren Jeff's house and stuff is similar to that.
Yeah, that's very ironic, I think,
Yeah.
when you ended up with that house. I'll tell you, when you were so in the documentary, Steve, she's an elite wife in Texas and then sort of relegated to this compound in South Dakota, because you're not playing along with the scenario. So there's a moment where you escape from the South Dakota compound, and it shows Steve, it shows her, she's running down the road. You even talk to law enforcement, but can't convey. It really showed me just how trapped you are, not physically, but psychologically. You can't even convey the help you need or what could be done. And you end up going back. There was no help there. And then juxtaposition later when you escape in Short Creek, and right away there's help. People know who to call. And that to me was very inspiring, to think that now there's help, and now you're even a part of that help. So that to me was just a
Yeah.
wonderful part of it.
And that was a lot about God. Like literally, like the resources that ended up being there at the right times was God. I had no idea. The lady who was sitting in her yard, meditating in her backyard, and I ran through her yard, she knew who to call. And she I didn't know her. She was dressed ex FLDS, but I had never met her, I don't think. So like the resource, I knew where I was going, and she did help me talk to them also, but she's the one that actually had the contact information. Yeah.
And you just happened to run through her yard as you're jumping out
Yes.
of that window in your brother's trailer, and you're just going. So, no, but just the difference when you escaped before, there was no help. You had to go back, and now things are in place. So that was a very positive.
Also meeting
side.
Briell Decker, who adopted me
Yeah.
later. She was like a peer support specialist, and I am actually a peer support specialist now in Utah. I work at the Dream Center in that capacity, as well as an RA, which is a residential aide. But anyway, she knew the tricks that these people play, these cults, and that played a big role in like after effects, ripple effects, and my safety and my being able to heal, start my healing journey. If she didn't adopt me, because I actually went to Tennessee for 2 years, Nashville, and did like my paperwork there, even though she's the one that adopted me in Utah. The paperwork was done in Tennessee because I was worried about being kidnapped off the street, and my case was so severe that I didn't. And there was some people who had been kidnapped off the street at the time frame, so I didn't want to risk that because then they had so much medical records on me, they could just commit me, or there was just too risky. So we did all the paperwork in Tennessee. It took 2 years, and then I came back to Salt Lake first because my adoptive family lived here, and then I found out about the building of Warren Jeff's house and that I had rights to it in some ways. Yeah.
I wanted to, first of all, you brought up your faith, and I want to talk about your faith in a bit, but I also want to kind of tie that in with the Dream Center. Now, for those of you who watched the interview we did with Allison, I had talked about how I live in a Christian community in which the pastor, Tommy Barnett, was Assemblies of God minister in Arizona, and he was a guest speaker here. And he said, mark this spot, because he felt like the Holy Spirit was telling him, mark this spot. And for years, they had a plaque at the front of the church where he was standing. This is where the Dream Center was born, at this spot. And it's just amazing to see that happen, that it got its start right here. And now, and the Dream Center is an international ministry. They have a big facility in Los Angeles, and they've been branching out. And then tell us a little bit about the Dream Center and your relationship with them. What's that been like?
I love the Dream Center. They're so good to me, and they're good to everyone. They really are above board. They really try hard to do everything. And we just had licensing come yesterday for the year and inspect, and they said we're a breath of fresh air, and that was so good to hear, because like it takes a lot of work to be that. It takes so much work to have the house clean, to have that building that I was awarded was 28,000 square feet. So it's like a mansion. It wasn't like a little house that we were just like turning into a recovery center. That was there's the Dream Center itself has just been so good to me. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but they really, when they found me, so like basically I submitted a business plan to the UEP, which is the landowners in Short Creek, after I asked some questions and figured out I had some rights to the house through the UEP. It kind of explains that in the documentary how the UEP works and stuff. And they were giving back titles to people that had built the houses and also wives of people. And Warren Jeffs is in prison for life. So I went and submitted a business plan because it was too big for me to just live in. And in the business plan, I actually told the lady who was writing it to write the dream house. She ended up writing the dreaming house, and I had never heard of the Dream Center that came a year later. Like, that was a God moment because they didn't have to replace all that paperwork once the Dream Center did come on board, because it was almost identical, almost the same name to what we asked for.
And what kind of work is the Dream Center doing out in Short Creek? And you know what, Rebecca, I'm going to be coming out next month to Utah from February 7th to the 17th. And part of me wants to maybe head down there and check it out. But tell us what the Dream Center does.
So the Dream Center is their motto is find a need and fix it, find a hurt and heal it. And they basically go into the community and find out what that community needs. Every Dream Center is specialized. They basically take care of like physical safety, like I think of them like that. Like I think of them like in the Short Creek area, it's basically prioritized. They do take people from anywhere in crisis, but they prioritize definitely people from cults in the Short Creek one. And they have no deadlines. Like domestic violence shelters have deadlines. You have like 30 days to figure it out, at the most. But in the Dream Center, we base it all on their goals, their specific goals that they have for themselves. As long as they're keeping peace in the house and working toward their goals in their own life, they can stay. And some people do stay for years, and that's really needed with the cult survivors, is because some of them don't have IDs and stuff. Like it takes a while to find people at the birth to figure out how to do that, and we have case managers who navigate that with them. It's definitely specific in this area. But they also don't talk about God a lot, like because it's a trigger in this area. So the staff is Christian, but all the residents don't have to be, and we can't bring it up. So basically, we just serve and serve and serve, and that's how we show the love of Jesus. But we don't walk around and talk about it very often, because it's like walking into a rape recovery center and saying we're going to talk about your trigger, Yeah, so we can't do that here in this location. But we've have a really good success rate. I think it's like 95 or something, like success rate for people that finish the program and succeed on the outside.
Wow. I'm
Yeah.
really glad to hear this.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
What kind of people are finding their way to the center? Is it individuals like you? Is it moms with kids?
Moms with
All
kids.
different kinds are leaving and finding.
I'm so thrilled to see moms with kids. There's been moms with kids, because like that was the hardest dynamic to free from these cults, because they didn't have anywhere and they don't dare leave. So like with me, I had an easier time, even though it was pretty hard, because I didn't have any kids. But moms with kids, like they're taking the leap of faith, some of them. And yeah, so we see moms with kids. We see that it does have women in the top floor and men in the basement, and then the middle floor is it is like offices and where we eat. We kind of socialize together. It has an art room. That is the middle floor, and there's a mission house that's like across the way, and it has like 15 rooms, and they house mission crews that come and help the community out. If you look up the shortcreekdreamcenter.org, it kind of explains a lot about the Dream Center. But yeah, they have it, so it's just so amazing to be there and not have to worry about the house not being fixed up and stuff. Like most places in Short Creek, when they start a business, they don't have their licensing at first, and it takes a lot because the houses are not finished to be able to get the licensing. They took 3 years just to get the licensing because of everything it needed. And they really, when they came on board, then I didn't have a lot of knowledge about real estate. So it wasn't like a cut and dry experience for them. Like most real estate people won't even consider a property if it doesn't have everything in place. Where the Dream Center was like, we'll pick it up from here. We're going to pay your power and water bills even before there's any contracts. And they really made it happen. And they took 3 years to do that, but they did do it before they could fill the house to capacity. They were able to take in some people, but now they can fill it to capacity, and it's been like that for 2 years.
Huh.
And
Wow.
they usually do fill it with priority people, honestly.
And so it's been at capacity for 2 years.
Yes.
And are they thinking? Are you guys thinking of expanding your building, or if you're running a capacity, maybe getting more properties, or what are you thinking there?
They have got more properties. They have a food bank now, and they serve this community, and they serve like every week clockwork. And there's a lot of people that come because it's like a poverty town, because of everybody is ex-FLDS. Most everybody's ex-FLDS now, but they have still big families. They have poverty level, So they have a food bank. They have a transitional house now for people that have graduated the program that aren't quite like they aren't in crisis anymore, but they also don't have a house yet of their own. So they have a transitional house and they can move in there sometimes if they qualify and all that. Like a domestic violence shelter has like transitional house. They have a building for that now. They want a daycare because single moms that come in sometimes can't get work because that's like a catch-22, and there's not a daycare in this town that is certified at the state because of the catch with like fixing up the buildings and all that. So the Dream Center wants to expand to a daycare eventually, and they also have a director house on the same lot that the Dream Center building. They had a small house. They had two small houses. One of them is like a clothing closet. One of them is the director house. And then they have the Dream Center on that lot, and then they have the mission house. So they've been doing a lot to pull this off. And I just am so grateful for them because like, and this whole town, like people in the Dream Center have told me like, we don't really want to take over this town. It's not our goal, but we feel like that most people in this town are in survival mode, and we're just here to serve because we're a nonprofit, you know. So it's a win-win, really, if you think about it, to have them here and to be able to cover, you know, just support. Their facility is basically the Dream Center itself, they call it it's a long phrase, but it's like, I call it a support facility, but they call it like a social support facility or something like that.
Yeah, because I
Well,
think about how
it takes more advanced patients. Like most of the time, it's not a rehab. Most of the time they have to be further in their recovery if they ever went on drugs. Because people that come directly from the cult, they don't have that issue most of the time anyway. So they will take them if they're more advanced, like if they've been clean for so long or whatever. But it's not a rehab. It's more like a support facility to help them just learn about the ways of, you know, out here in the world and figure out how to get their feet under them.
that's what I keep thinking is the people that must come there, like they come with nothing, like
Yeah.
nothing, and then no experience, like you said, in the world. I mean, it really is starting from ground zero. And so how would someone support this endeavor? Go on the website. I mean, I think
Yeah.
a lot of people watching this just absolutely touched by this and now maybe aware. How would one support?
The Dream Center has a donate button for sure. They do encourage mission crews on there too, I think, because they just come and weed people's yards. You know, they have a whole time span, however much time they book out ahead of time, and bring a crew and they paint people's houses, you know, just do work. And there's so much to do, here. Because this town is so different than most towns in America. They built the town, basically, FLDS mostly built it. And they set it up to where you didn't have to have a loan on your house because like the banks they felt were prejudiced against FLDS. So they set it up to where you could build as you want. So most of the houses are unfinished. Yeah.
Oh wow, what just a completely different dynamic. Everything's so upside down and crazy, and this was the world you grew up in. And you know, I just it really is amazing to me because you know I remember having a conversation with somebody and I was talking about Dr. Randy Bell. Dr. Randy Bell goes around and does work for like insurance companies. He goes to man-made tragedies. So this is a man, and he was also a consultant with the O.J. Simpson trial with the Nicole Brown Simpson family. And he's been to 9/11, the Twin Towers right after it happened. He was at Sandy Hook right after it happened. He was at the Pulse nightclub shooting right after it happened. He was at Jeffrey Epstein's island to kind of after everything was revealed about what was going on there. He has seen evil in his face. He has stared it right in the eyes. Yet he believes. He believes in God. And I guess my biggest question is, how the hell can you believe in God?
Well, when I went to
see evil like he did, or experience what you did, how does that happen? Please share it.
Okay, so like with me, I saw too many miracles. Like I saw threatenings, and I would just like it would turn. Like I would hesitate, and I'd have a peace come over me, and I would just like they'd hesitate too, and it caused like me to survive so many things and stuff. I just couldn't deny him. Like, it was like too many miracles. Like, there's just too many things that happened in my life to say that I didn't believe in the God I was raised with because of Warren Jeffs. Like, I didn't believe he was the example and stuff that he claimed to be, and the God I'd been told about my whole life. But there was a time in my life, I literally, inside of the FLDS, when I was trying to escape, that I felt like I just didn't know God. I did think he had my back, though. I didn't know him. And Warren just taught that you have to pray a certain way or God won't hear you and stuff like that. So I didn't know if he could hear me, but I felt like he probably could, because like he was helping me.
So it was actual experiential,
Yeah.
miraculous events that happened in your life that in your mind you could not deny there being a God, because in one sense he brought you through all this. Even while you were experiencing it, you felt like God had your back.
Yeah, I did. I always felt like there was just too many times. There's just too many times. Like, even the escape itself, I literally had to unscrew the screws in the window to be able to climb out of it. And I just, and to have that happen in my life and to realize that I did escape the very last time, that I even had maybe an opportunity. And getting to Tennessee and figuring out that I have freedom in my life for the first time. I can choose if I go to college, I had choices in my life. I had like opportunities to go to the doctor if I wanted to without asking. You know, there's just simple things. There's so many things though that I would have never experienced had I not pulled out those scissors and tried to unscrew those screws that day. Things like that change you, you know. And for me, it was like that had to have been God. God had to have been there, because like it felt like almost like the FLDS teach a lot about the lifting up, you know, like God will be there and he'll lift people up to not experience the bad things in the world, you know, in the destructions. I don't believe that, but like what I went through reminds me similar of like a lifting up. Like, he opened the way for me to get out of there. It wasn't like off the ground, but it was like one step off, one foot in front of the other. He literally made a path for me. There wasn't a path before that.
Mm.
Of course, he used me because I was a vessel. You know, I had to do my part. He didn't just do it for me. But when I did my part, he did open the pathway for me to be able to figure it out. And I had to work my way from South Dakota to Colorado City. It doesn't really go into that very deep. It just says that my new caretaker was my brother and stuff like that. But there's a whole lot more information about like having to fight my way out of there. And the reason I even went in there, it doesn't say really clearly. I went in there because of the children. He had a meeting the day after I married him about like how it was a secret meeting, and he talked about how his kids were taken away from the property that he lived in before he became the leader. And it was because he was running from the law. He didn't want his children to be questioned by the law. And in my mind, well, that was all okay, that makes sense. But then he said, God revealed that not one of the mothers that gave birth, so he had like, you know, I was 65, so he had 65 wives at the time, and none of the mothers that gave birth were worthy to go with their kids at that time. That meant like 20 to 30 mothers lost their kids in one day. But I was a mother who hadn't had any kids, so I could go check on them. And why would I not do that? So in my mind, that's why I went into Texas. It doesn't go into all that, but it's okay. It does a really good job. It just kind of gets to the point that we were like trapped. It doesn't like focus on a lot of other things, which is fine. That's a really good message. So I did go into Texas to check on the children. And what I witnessed is that they had less stability than adoption, because in adoption, you have the hope of them bonding with their new caretaker, their new person who's watching over them. Well, whenever they would bond, then Warren Jeffs would rotate the mothers. So they would never trust anyone to tell them a secret. That's what I witnessed. And that's why I didn't want kids with him. And also it goes into some of the dark stuff of reasons why there was no way for me to continue on that path. I wasn't attracted to him, but that wasn't the biggest deal. The biggest deal was like, he was a pedophile. So Yeah, and I figured that out. So I was like, no. And then I kind of went into houses in hiding until like after he was arrested, because I didn't want to be pulled into more traumatic, really traumatic events. And then I started researching my way out. So I didn't actually escape for about 5 years after he was put in prison, or after he was at least caught. And then 4 or 5 years. And then I went to, I actually filed a case right shortly after there was a class action in the works. I was put in that case and just testified against Warren in federal court in last September in a 7-year case that was filed. So that's all more stuff. So we're still waiting on our judgment numbers, but that should be coming out soon. When the judge finalizes the judgment numbers, then that will be public. Yeah. That's my goal, is credibility. I really wanted the credibility, because like I feel like that going into law is one of my next angles. I definitely want to dig deeper. I'm like, you can't say it's black and white, the wedding, you're either a child or you're an adult, because I was an adult at 18. He had intent to make me an accomplice, which I didn't know at the time of the wedding. So why are we focusing on the wedding? It's not about polygamy anymore. It's about coercion or something else.
Yeah, that's a huge takeaway for me. I realized it was not about polygamy. It was just about an evil person who destroyed stability, destroyed families.
Yeah.
And in fact, one of the most powerful parts, I don't know if you want to talk about this or not, the coercion and the psychological damage was just so deep that there's a point where you feel like it's probably better that I'm just not here anymore.
Yeah.
That's what they all want me to do. There was a blood atonement aspect to it that was just, I mean, I'm watching this at like 2:30 in the morning. I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about that, but
yeah,
it was a powerful part. And yet you came out of that, you rose out of that even more determined to, to someday not be in this situation anymore. So
it was basically the second attempt, well, the one in the reservoir, was basically turned around because of my belief in God. And they kind of focus on that. They say, like, I decided I didn't want to meet God that way. I didn't want to die by suicide and meet God that way. That was the reason I turned around and decided not to go under. They weren't anywhere around. They had 3 minutes. I knew they would have 3 minutes from the time I went in the reservoir, because you can only be underwater for like 3 minutes. And we didn't know how to swim. I didn't know how to swim. Like, we always had those long dresses and we got in water and stuff. Like, I had no training on that. So if I went under, they would have approximately 3 minutes to rescue me. They were nowhere around for a while I stood in the water. So like, and they weren't trying to come around. So that was one of the biggest wake up calls to me that day, was like, they're serious about this, they aren't messing around.
yeah,
They really
want
want me to
They
die. Yeah.
Yeah.
And another thing that they don't really go into it, but they do say, is when they did start drugging me at 23, they didn't start out with 800 milligrams. They started out with probably a high dose. I don't remember what the first dose was, but they built up to the 800 milligrams of Seroquel. And 800 milligrams of Seroquel is lethal unless you build up to it and you actually, need it, which in my case, I was fighting for safety. So I was fighting my drugs every single day, and that caused like a retention where I could handle more medicine.
And they just wanted to keep you controlled. They just wanted you not
to
go into
trouble. That,
They just wanted to keep you down and in a constant drug
and they
state.
didn't have a doctor appointment to decide if I needed that. They just were told to give it to me, and they sent somebody in to give it to me. And like, now that I escaped and I changed my whole social, every time I walk into a hospital, they have no record of anything prior. So it started completely over my medicine. And I only take like 20 milligrams of a different kind of medicine that's less like strong.
Right. With a doctor.
With a doctor. And I
doing
sleep.
the right thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I sleep like just fine. So for them to have me on 800 at that time was just so horrific. They were really trying to kill me, I think, just with that. Mm-hmm. Like, if you think about that, like, up in my dose that high is basically probably trying to kill me.
Right. And it was because, like you said, you were an accomplice, But you knew details, you knew things just by living the life with everyone and seeing things. So
But I also wasn't like a
Just like
normal
it.
accomplice, because like I escaped, like I was
Yes,
introduced
right.
and then I left. Where most of them, that's why I think he was the most mad, is because he didn't have a history of me going back. Where I did witness him telling other ladies, "You can't leave." People that confronted him, he was horrible. He was telling him, "No, you have to stay. You need to stay here." You know, he wasn't letting him. And the route I took was like more of an I need more time. I just need to think about this a little longer. You know, I didn't just confront him. I was in
Right.
survival, really heightened, probably a more heightened way. I was going to do anything it took to get out of there.
Yeah.
And he did buy into my story and he did let me leave. And then I didn't go back. I actually wrote to him and said, "I'm not going to go back until I decide I'm ready. And I'm going to stop praying to ensure that I don't, because like if you send a rebellious person back to this holy land, it kind of makes you," and I told the whole house I wasn't praying. So like he was furious, especially when he got caught and he had missed his opportunity to make me more of an accomplice. Um, I did become a huge target, where some people in there, like other wives that had littler kids, they still had the safety, they had the self-defense angle more, because they would do anything for their littler kids on the property. And if they confronted him on anything, then he could take them away from their littler kids on the property. And that wouldn't have been a good solution either. So some of them, there's other ones that have escaped now, and they're like telling me, you know, like, we just worked our way out on our own terms because we never became a target, because we had a cause that was more important than the 12-year-old, which was sad.
How many,
But
I
yeah,
was going to ask that. How many, do you have a number of how many have left? How many of the wives? There were how
there's
many
not very
altogether?
many.
87
It's like
altogether or
6
something?
wives, but he also uses that against them every time they're brought back into a situation. And it says that in there. They use that tool. So I was hoping if anybody can get to any of them to tell them, you know, like, we can break that. You know, he would use that against them. He'd say, "You're an accomplice." You, in his trainings and stuff, like sometimes he would say, you know, "The world doesn't want you," you
Right.
know, stuff like
He's
that. And they
still
believe it.
powerful. He's still
Yeah.
powerful, even
Yeah.
though that was one of the things in the
Yeah.
documentaries. One of the cult experts said they feel like he's more powerful now than ever with the control
Yeah.
over everyone.
Yeah. So most of his wives didn't leave. Most of them have never even thought about it, because like they feel like the world doesn't want them. Yeah. And so and they were trapped, you know. And some of them, I think we should hear out their stories, because like some of them did have reasons, and some of them were perpetrators, you know. Some of them didn't have good reasons. And you have to hold people accountable sometimes, because like when there's a whole room of women, you know, like are just allowing it, like there's got to be more to it, you know.
Yeah.
We can't let this happen. Like you can't, like there are children in there. Yeah.
This begs the question that we were talking about this beforehand. I was talking with Rebecca. How is it that Warren Jeffs is able to communicate to the group? How is he even allowed to? It'd be like a mobster being able to control his mafia empire from prison, which I guess probably does happen. But how is he even able to communicate, and why would they even allow him to? I'm just curious about that.
It has got stricter over the years. At first, it was definitely not very strict. So that was when I was trying to escape. He did have a lot more access to talk to people, visitors, attorneys at the time. He would talk over the phone. And they do have rules in the prison where every prisoner has some rights, and they can't like cross that off for him only, you know. So he does have, and every leeway he gets, and he talks in a different, like a coded language. So like, um, he does talk English, but like if you didn't know his coded language, you wouldn't catch everything he's saying. And even if you do know his coded language, he can change it. Like he can slowly incorporate another code for that word. And I know how that works because I learned all that, but I did it for survival. In my case, I could read my codes, and they also targeted me so bad that it became really obvious to me. But it was like a lot of gaslighting, because like he had so much control too. He had who lived with us, and he put like the most loyal followers around. Once he went to prison, and I started to research my routes out, he'd put like the most loyal people around him to target me. So people who would do anything for him were like in the same room sometimes. You know, like it was a horrific thing trying to escape out of there. And yeah, there's certain times he can't get the message across, but there are times that the loyal followers figured out. And it's just like when they talked in the training about him getting up and saying, "I'm no longer a prophet." You know, we've heard that recording quite a bit. The loyal followers wouldn't let that happen.
Right.
Yeah.
He was
And they actually hid it from
Satan.
us. Yeah, I was in there at the time that happened, and they actually were bringing all the recordings to us to listen to, and they were recording it somehow, and they would bring us the recording of every message he gave. Well, when that happened, they came and said, "Well, we're not going to give it to you this week." They didn't tell us why. They didn't tell us, you know, they said, "This week we don't have a recording for you." When I got out of the church, I figured out what he actually said, and then they had hid it from us.
Wow, what an incredible story. You know, Briell, I just want to thank you so much for coming on the program today. I know we have, I want to be respectful for your all time. We're all taking some time to do this. And I just want to thank you so much for, one, sharing your story with the Discovery crew and everything that they did. That took a lot of courage, and it was probably maybe brought some closure and healing in your life to be able to talk about these things. And thank you for coming on the program today to kind of give us a post-mortem, if you will, of the episodes now that they've aired, and kind of give us some inside information. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I hope it helps, but yeah.
That's great. And was there anything, any final words you'd like to share with the audience?
I just say thank you for everything that you do for the Dream Center. You know, like I don't really have things attached to this. I just want, you know, the Dream Center to be okay. So that's my call to action, I guess. Like donate to the Dream Center, because like, yeah, they really are helping this community, and they really are making a difference in the people's lives that, you know, I know, and other polygamy groups. They'll take people priority from other polygamy groups too, and cults and stuff like that.
So we'll have links in the description to the Dream Center of Short Creek. So if you want to support it, Rebecca, what did you think of today's episode? What an amazing, it must be really amazing for you to have been up watching the series, and now you get to interview Briell. What's that like?
Oh, it's surreal. I'm going to have to take a long nap, I think. But I think I'd just like to thank Allison Biggers for putting this all together and making the connection. She's wonderful, and she's so passionate about the Dream Center and helping everyone there too. She's just such a wonderful ally. And just, I would encourage everyone, please watch this documentary. I mean, just the human spirit, somebody that rises above, you just can't even fathom what Briell was dealing with, and it's just so inspiring in a universal way. It's just incredible. So yeah, I can't recommend it more highly. And Briell's just wonderful. It's been amazing to meet you. You're just an awesome person. It's just an honor to meet you.
And you too, both of you. Thank you.
No, thank you.
So much.
And I just want to say, folks, I want you to leave your comments in the and let us know, what do you think? Have you watched it, Prisoner of the Prophet? And also, what do you think of this interview? And just tell us your thoughts and feelings, because I know a lot of people come. I mean, I have a lot of fundamentalists that watch the program. I've had many fundamentalists come on my program, and Wild, and you know, I mean, Benjamin Schaefer and their group, and others, and of course, I've had people like Christina Rossetti on, and Lindsay Hansen Park, and Liz Phillips, and so we've had this dialogue with the Mormon fundamentalists, and of course, that's the key thing about this channel, is that we do have that dialogue. And so I just want to remind you folks, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if for those of you who want to financially support the channel, MormonBookReviews.com is our merch store. I hold that nice mug up there, where you can buy items like mugs and hats and t-shirts and everything like that. Also, those of you who would like to financially support the channel, I have links for Patreon as well as PayPal. But as I was saying, we talked to a lot of people on this program, and that's the most important thing about this channel. And that is, remember this, folks, the most important thing is that all the voices of the restoration will be heard here on Mormon Book Reviews.